Would you turn in your Bibles, if you would, to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Before I get started, I just want to make a statement that it's just really hard to fix stupid, right? We've had this rash of break-ins out at our place. You know, they broke into our barn. They didn't break, they just raised the door and stole a bunch of stuff and had stuff laying out on the ground to take. And we have some neighbors down the street that they went in and got some stuff from them, and they went back to their house again. Of course, they're like me, they locked everything up. And they have a fence that's about that high. It's about that high. It's about that high. And they cut a hole in the fence rather than just jumping over the fence. I don't know where people are.
So Sherlock Holmes would say, that's a fat criminal.
Yeah, he probably would. He probably would.
Or he's planning on stealing something heavy.
Real short.
You just,
But they didn't steal anything. They didn't
They-
take anything.
they didn't take anything. They just crawled in there and looked, see what was going on. Can't fix stupid, so. All right, I want to begin this section of our series on dealing with stress. This probably will be the last section that I teach on over the next several weeks. And I'll probably have some concluding studies, just a couple. I'm going to give you my top 10 key principles. I'm going to go back and try to give those. I'll give you all the principles. I know that you cannot remember everything, all of these principles. I can't remember them, and I'm the one that's developed them. So I'm going to give you the sheet of paper. I'm going to run them off for you when I get through and give them all to you. And then I'm going to sort of condense them down to my 10 favorite. You may have others. You may not like any of them, but I'm going to give you all my 10 to see how you like them. Maybe it'll help you to as we go forward. I'm really struggling with what to teach next. I really am. I've got so much response from this, from just everywhere. I'm just struggling to know where to go next, and so just be praying for me. I'm doing a lot of reading and trying to figure out what to do.
Just go back to the beginning and start it over.
I'm not going to do that. So. It's been almost a year. This is study number 51. And I want to give you a passage here in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 7 through 12, that I really want to serve as kind of a foundational baseline for what we're going to be talking about when it comes to stress. It was really interesting to me when I decided to talk about stress. I'd been reading about it, I bought some books on it, done some research. And it was really interesting to me that the word stress is not actually in the scriptures. It's not used in the scriptures. There are other words, probably the key word that's used in the scriptures, I think, that would replace stress is the word distress. And distress is used over 100 times. And then there's the word anxiety, I think, that mirrors what stress is. And so there are a lot of verses that talk about it, and we'll look at some of those verses. But this is the one passage that I want to set the tone for what we're teaching. This is about Paul. It's about what Paul went through. It says in verse 7, "But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellence of the power may be of God and not of us." We are hard pressed on every side. Just hard pressed on every side. Every day's tough. Every day is difficult, yet not crushed. We're perplexed, but not in despair. We're confused a little bit. We're not exactly sure why people do what they do and how they act the way that they act. We are persecuted. He certainly was persecuted and beaten and stoned and left for dead, but he was not forsaken, struck down but not destroyed, always carrying about in the body, in the physical body, the dying of the Lord Jesus, that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our body. For we who live are always delivered to death for Jesus' sake, that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our mortal flesh. So then, death is working in us, but life in you. Paul just really had an eternal perspective on just everything in his life that was stressful. He understood that God was using those events in his life in a way. Death was working in him, but it was creating life in other people that he knew and that he met. I mean, if there was ever anyone who experienced a stressful life, it had to be Paul. I'm glad that the Lord hasn't called on me to live that kind of life. It was hard. It was difficult. Life in those days was hard and difficult. Travel was hard. Everywhere he went, people disliked him. They hated him. They wanted to kill him. It seems to me, when I read through the New Testament, that Paul's life and many of the other disciples was just one stressful moment after another. And they were leading up to a point where they were all going, except for John, who they exiled to the Isle of Patmos. They were all going to be martyred for their faith, and they knew that. They understood it. And I think if you lived under those circumstances on a daily basis, if we lived in some second or third world country, or even a first world country, where you as a Christian, your life was always threatened, you didn't know whether or not somebody was going to come and kill you. It was really interesting. I've been getting these emails. I've gotten a ton of emails for this outfit called Students for Life, and they are college students that are engaged in the abortion conflict, and they're out doing what pro-life people would do, and everywhere they go they have this. I don't know if anybody is familiar with it. They have this group called, I think it's something Betsy or Betsy something, that is attacking them. They come up with
Jane's Revenge.
huh?
It's called Jane's Revenge.
Jane's Revenge. Okay, that's what it is. Where'd I get Betsy from? And they are threatening them with AK-16s or AR-16s. Everywhere they go, they tell them they're going to kill them. They march. They can't find a safe place to go. Hotels don't want them there because of all of that. This is here in America, happening on a regular basis. And so I'm really, these are young people. I'm really grateful that they have not succumbed. They've not acquiesced to all of that. It would be stressful if you were 20 or 21 years old in college and you had people that were threatening you to kill you because you believed in life. Just doesn't even make sense, but it's out there. And So I think if we just look at Paul's life, it's not difficult for me to appreciate how Paul could easily have become stressed out, and I'm sure that he did. I'm sure that he did. I'm sure I don't want to go through this today and make anybody feel that I believe that Paul didn't undergo stress. I think he underwent stress a lot more than we do, and he knew that and understood it. And but he understood how to handle it. And there's simply those moments in your life when you have to do what 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 7 encourages us to do, and it says to cast all of your care upon him because he cares for you. Just comes a point where you just have to take the difficulties in your life and you have to cast those cares on the Lord, knowing that he cares for you. This is something that you have to learn to do. I don't know how to say it any other way. You just have to, when the stressful moments come, I can't tell you exactly how you cast your care on the Lord. I just know that you can. It's a matter of faith. It's a matter of trusting. And you learn to do those things when stress is building up in your life and applying pressure on your life and your family that are unhealthy. You have to take your care. You have to take your hurts. You have to take your disappointments. You have to give them to God. Whatever they are, the stress that comes into your life, you have to learn how to let God help you through them. I think that the longer that you wait to do that, the harder it becomes. And the greater the stress becomes. And the greater the stress becomes, the more difficult it is to figure out how to cast your care on him. I want you to turn over, if you would, to 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 16. This is Paul's benediction to the second letter here in Thessalonians. And these people were concerned about the end times, and they thought the day of the Lord had already come, and that came up in 1 Thessalonians, and Paul had to deal with that, so there are some brothers that are walking disorderly. You can read that in verse 6 and all the way through up into verse 16. And it says there, now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace always in every way. The Lord be with you all. May the Lord of peace himself give you peace always in every way. In every circumstance that you find yourself in, every high stress, low stress, difficult moment in your life, Paul is praying that the Lord himself, the Lord of peace, would give you peace in every way. I wonder if you have ever felt really stressed out about something that was happening in your life. I think you have. I certainly have. It might be caring for a loved one or losing a loved one. We all have dealt with stress. We live in America, right? We have politics that are going on are just ridiculous. You may work with somebody that's very irritable and cranky and difficult to get along with, snappy, and you have to drive on the highway. I get stressed out driving. I really do. People are crazy. I mean, people are just insane. When I had to go up last week to Greenville-Spartanburg area to do the interview on television, I don't think I'd ever seen that much traffic at night on wherever it was that we were. I don't know. Scott was driving, and he drives a lot faster than I do. And I just, it was amazing, just people just flying down the road and on a 3 or 4 lane highway on both sides. I was having a rough time. You may not make enough to live on. Listen, I get stressed out just trying to find a parking lot at Walmart, right? It just bothers me. I don't like to go to Walmart. The parking lot's way too big. I don't want my wife ever going there by herself. I don't want her walking a long way, getting away from the cars. Thank goodness we have a handicap card that we put up in the window there. But I mean, that can stress me out. Just trying to find a parking place, and it's way down at the end, and it's crowded. I actually chose to retire at the ripe old age of 59. And why did I choose to retire at 59? I chose to retire because of all the stress that my job had placed on me. It was just unbelievable. The site was downsizing, which meant that the workload on those that still were there was upsizing. And I reached a point, where somebody would leave and, they would give all of their work to you. And I was managing 5 groups at one time when I finally left. And it was just a lot of stress, and I began to realize that. And then on top of simple things like these mentioned, there are moments in our life over which we have no control. Just have absolutely no control. Things that are completely beyond our ability to control. There are crisis moments that we can have in our life at any particular times, and they can all create some unexpected stress that makes a bad day look like a great day, right? If you have one of these crisis moments in your life, I'm sure that all of us have at some time. So I guess the point that I'm making is that no one is exempt from stress. Paul certainly wasn't exempt from it. Jesus wasn't exempt from it. I'm not exempt from it. You're not exempt from it. And there's a reason why, if you go out and do the study, why stress is called, anybody know what it is? Somebody tell me. The silent killer. The silent killer. No wonder people have strokes. No wonder people get cancer. No wonder people struggle. I was doing some research on stress. This is really interesting. I'll give you some feedback on this here in a minute, but I was doing some research on stress, and according to the American Institute of Stress, now somebody gets paid, some organization gets paid to worry about stress, It said that 77% of Americans experience major levels of stress on a very frequent basis. Now, I had to think about that for a little bit. 77% of everybody you see, if you saw 100 people, 77 of them are going to be struggling at some time in their life, maybe right then, with some major level of stress on a very frequent basis. For me, there's no real surprise there. When I read it, I wasn't shocked at that at all. It just kind of made sense to me. It actually seems to be a fairly normal experience for a lot of people, that they do experience stress. The people I think that experience stress the most are the people that do not know how to handle stress the easiest. So if you are an anxious person, if you are a distrustful person, if you are a strong-willed person, whatever it may be, there's a good chance that you don't know how to actually handle the stress that's going to come into your life. It will come. And so there are a lot of people that are living under different levels and degrees of stress. Now, I have a list here. I went out to several different places to find out what were some of the symptoms of stress that were created in our life. I'm going to give you this. It's kind of a long list. There's no way you can write all this down, so just the notes will be out there this week sometime. These are just some of the symptoms. If I didn't have time to write down all of them that were identified. These are just ones that make sense to me. Some of the symptoms associated with stress are headaches. That should be obvious, right? I think migraines. I know you can suffer from migraines. My son suffers from migraines. There are a lot of jobs that create stress, and people get migraines, but they certainly have headaches. A loss of physical, mental, and emotional energy. It's just a loss of strength, where you can't think right, you don't act right, you don't have any physical strength. One symptom is chest pains. There's a lot going on with stress that happens in your heart because your brain is sending out all of these neurotransmitters are transmitting signals to every part of your body when you go under stress, and your whole body comes under stress. And your heart is one of the major places where that occurs. No wonder everybody takes ibuprofen and Tylenol and all those kind of things.
Here, if it's physical, how can you control it?
Well, we're going to talk about some of that over the next 2 or 3 weeks here. Chest pains, nausea, dizziness, digestive disorders like irritable bowel syndrome, rapid breathing. Chris, you probably ought to teach this more than me here. You watch this, and if I say something that's wrong, please interrupt me and change it. Rapid breathing, people get all stressed out and they don't know how to breathe right. Scott, I think it was Scott Davis or somebody, who was it that was telling us that they were reading a book on breathing? I forget who it was. Somebody told me that they were reading a book on how to breathe, which I thought was kind of interesting, and the impact that proper breathing makes on your life. Breathing through your mouth is not that good. There's high blood pressure. I'm going to the doctor on Tuesday to my cardiologist, and I have about a 5-sheet, 3 or 4 month listing of all of my blood pressures. I take them 3 at a time. Do it once, do it twice, do it 3 times. Then I take the average of those 3 because they're always a little bit different. They want to put me on some blood pressure medicine, and I don't have a reason for it. There's nothing in my blood pressure that all these numbers that say that I should. Anxiety. You know people that are anxious. I know people that are anxious about anything. Anything that happens in their life is a crisis almost. They don't know how to handle it. They just get upset. They get anxious about things. Loss of sleep. I think that loss of sleep is a real, from everything that I've been able to read so far, that loss of sleep is one of the really first indicators that you're under stress. The body's built to sleep. The body's built to rest. And to sort of relieve some of this, and a loss of sleep is something that is one of the first signs, it seems to be, of being under stress.
Then it magnifies everything else.
It does. It really does. It really does. If I don't get a good night's sleep, I don't feel well the next day. Now, that's a good point, Chris. Thank you. A lack of concentration, just not being able to, of course, if you don't get enough sleep and stuff, you don't You're not able to concentrate very well. If you don't know how to concentrate, you're not going to be able to use good judgment whenever you're communicating or making decisions. Irritability, becoming irritable with people, sort of quick-tempered, have short fuse, becoming agitated. Agitation is one of these areas. Avoiding responsibility, lack of energy, lack of purpose. Depression is a real sign of being under stress. You're just tired, you're worn out, you can't take any more, you're easily fatigued. And this is just a sampling of this is maybe half of the symptoms that I studied about. And I think we've all probably suffered from some of these at some time in our life. And then to make it worse, I thought this was interesting. It has to do with sleeping. Studies have identified that 48% of people, 48%, that's half of the people in this room, right? 1 out of every 2 people, that 48% of people struggle to sleep well because of stress-related issues. I thought that was tremendously significant. None of this sounds very good to me. I want you to go to Proverbs chapter 14. I love the first part of this verse, and I just want to read it to you. Got a couple that we'll read to you, I think, today. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 30. And I want to read it in the NIV, which is a little bit different than the New King James. The New King James says, "A sound heart is life to the body, but envy is rottenness to the bones." So it calls it a sound heart is life to the body. The NIV, this is the one that I really like, the translation. It says, "A heart at peace gives life to the body." A heart at peace gives life to the body. The Amplified, I love the Amplified Bible. If you don't have one, you need to get one. I love it. The Amplified Bible says, "A calm and undisturbed mind." Now, we've been dealing with connecting my mind with my life. A calm and undisturbed mind and heart are the life and health of the body. I think there's a wonderful insight in that, and that's what we want to learn to develop in our life. What do we have to do to bring our heart to be at peace, to have a calm mind, to have an undisturbed mind and heart? That's where we're sort of headed. We won't get there today, obviously, but that's the goal. I want you to think about those two statistics. About the 77% of the people that you meet or some of them could easily be going through a very high stress time in their life. And the 48% of the people that are half of the people that you know are with that didn't get any good rest last night. Let's just say that you're in an important meeting somewhere. You have a job. It's a high stress job. You're in an important meeting, and you have to make some very critical decisions. But you realize going into the meeting, maybe you're leading the meeting, that almost 8 out of 10 people that are there are under some kind of stress. It could be a family issue, it could be a financial issue, it could be a relational issue, it could be any kind of issue, it could be a physical issue, it could be a health issue, just any of those things. We'll talk about all of those. That 8 out of 10 of them attending the meeting are currently experiencing some kind of physical, mental, emotional, relational type of difficulty and stress in their life. So how confident would you be that a good decision could be successfully made? And then on top of that, 1 out of every 2 people in the room did not get a good night's sleep. And so they don't feel really good anyway. They just didn't rest well. So they may be a little grumpy and a little irritable by the time they reach the meeting, haven't had enough coffee yet. I wonder if you think under those circumstances that it's going to be a good meeting. May not be, because you have people that are under stress. I think where this can really be frightening is being on the highway, right? People are stressed out. They're just stressed out. They're stressed out. I think the highway is a good place to get your stress out, right? Stressed out people get stressed. They're stressed out on the highway. Just going back and forth to Windsor is a nightmare on some days. The traffic is just getting worse and worse, and people are passing, and so I'm out there with people that are stressed out, who are severely sleep deprived, and all of that can make for a very bad day.
Bad driving decisions.
Well, that's the point. That's the point. Stress is going to create you to not be able to use good judgment. I guess the real takeaway from all of this is really quite simple. Most everybody that you know, doesn't matter who it is, people you work with, people in your family, friends that you have, people that you're going to meet today at lunch. I never forget one time that when Ruby Tuesdays was in Aiken, that we went out to eat, and there were probably 3 or 4 couples of us. I went and know Larry and Bonnie were there, and me and Brenda, and I forget who else was there. I think there were probably 8 of us. And there was this lady that was waiting on us, and there's no way that you can, she's just coming up taking the order, and we're getting ready to pray over the meal or something, and Bonnie just very casually and graciously says, "Hey, we're getting ready to pray. Is there anything that we can pray for you about?" Right thing to do, right? And Bonnie, I don't know if you remember the lady, and she just just almost burst out in tears, and the next thing I know, she's sitting there weeping and saying, talking about her life and just some things. I don't even know, I don't remember all the details. This was years ago. But here was this lady that just kind of looked normal to me. She just looked normal to me. She looked like she was a waitress. She was there to do her job, and she wasn't normal. Her life was stressed out, and all somebody had to say was, "Is there anything we can pray for you about?"
Gary.
Yes.
She had a fiance that was getting married, and he was waiting for his heart pump to become an LVAD, just like Larry.
Oh, really?
And he died before he could do it.
Oh, wow.
And I had said something about that Larry was an LVAD. After that prayer, I think, and she
Was this-
just let loose.
Was this at Ruby Tuesday?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Tracy was there.
Oh, okay. Yesterday we had Benjamin came up from Charleston. I called him on Friday night and I said, "Son, I don't think that Maddie, that was his little dog, is doing well." And I said, "I just don't think she's doing well." I said, "Mom and I are going to take her to the vet tomorrow. We're going to try to get a vet and just take her." I didn't say anything about having to put her down. I just said she's not doing. She had a big lump of cancer right here, and she had other nodules of cancer, and she wasn't breathing well, and she wasn't eating. The day before she didn't eat anything, and I thought her kidneys were shutting down and all of that. And he said, "Daddy, I think it's time." And he came up, and that morning he got there about 10 o'clock, and we got to the vet about 11:15, and and we had made the decision to put her down. I can't tell you how difficult that was. We all cried. I cried, Brenda cried, Benjamin cried. I thought the doctor was going to cry. I mean, it was stressful. It was like, this dog has, it's just a dog, but she's been a part of our life for just 14 years. And she's lived with us for a good while when Benjamin was here, and then when he's been in Charleston. It was just very, very stressful. Yesterday was very stressful, and I know it was even more stressful on him to drive up and then come home, and he sat around and then to drive back home, and it was just very, very stressful.
Some professions, I would imagine, are also stressful. Imagine that doctor.
Mm-hmm.
With that, you never see people on their best, really. You see
Yeah.
them-
Well, I would think working in the ER would be a very stressful job. I just think it would be so stressful that people coming in all kinds of conditions, and you can't just leave stress behind, right? Everybody understand that? You can't, once you get stressed out, you don't just walk away from it. It stays with you, apparently for a long period of time. So I think most everyone you know is experiencing some level of stress in their life. They got health issues, relational issues, family issues, financial issues, physical issues. I think the list is just endless. Work issues. And I realize that some of it may be self-inflicted, all right? Let me just say this for the benefit of those people in whom the stress is self-inflicted. Even though it may be self-inflicted, they're still experiencing stress, all right? So all of these symptoms are going to be evident in their life at different times, and oftentimes people are stressed because of things that are totally beyond their control. Now, I want to just talk about some of these areas. I know this may not seem like a Bible study, but I'm going to use scriptures as we go through here and over the next couple weeks. The following are just some areas where stress may be impacting people. You can write these down. I've already mentioned most of them. In fact, you may be eerily familiar with some of these. I know that I have been. Your schedule. You leave for work early in the morning, you get home late, right? I don't know how people work these swing shifts where they work 4 days on, 2 days off, 3 days on, whatever it is. They switch over from night to day. In that, I don't know how in the world people do that. They work.
It's a challenge.
It is. It's beyond challenging. I mean, for me, it would be. My body, I could not take a job like that. I really don't enjoy getting up too early. I think that if the Lord had wanted me to get up really early every morning, like some people do, that He would have made sunrise later in the day. But I just, your body gets out of whack. It really gets out of whack very, very quickly.
That was true with Ethan, Casey, and Eric's son.
Yeah.
He took that high-paying job and he left it to go back to job at the golf course.
Right.
Way less
Right.
money. Affected him so bad.
And a lot less stress. Yeah, a lot less stress. So, I mean, no wonder their body and brain are stressed out. Number two, your budget. I think that normally in America, not everywhere, but normally in America, that a lack of funds is simply a reflection of bad planning or a lack of contentment. But once again, that doesn't eliminate the stress. The stress is still there. If you don't have enough money to pay your bills, or if something happens or somebody steals your credit card and That's the way you normally pay, and I don't carry cash around with me. I just use my credit cards normally.
Stressful when that card quits working.
Yeah, well, that happens, There's a stress with that. Monetary issues are often the root cause of nearly 50% of all divorces. 50%. Now that's a well-documented fact. It's certainly not the only reason, but it's one of the major reasons. Number 3, your physical health. If you're always tired, I doubt seriously that you will feel good. I do feel much, much better. I feel normal today.
Praise God.
My stomach's not bothering me. I don't have any headaches. I feel like I have plenty of energy. But when you don't feel good physically, I think that nothing works as well as it should, emotionally, relationally, physically, spiritually. I just don't think anything works as well when you don't feel good. Some health problems may be out of your control. You get COVID, or you get cancer, or you get, I know my grandson has got, what's it called? Ankylosing spondylitis. It's just completely out of his control, There are many people, many people's health problems are simply related to their lifestyle. They could change some things. They eat too much red meat, they eat too much sugar, too many carbs, not enough vegetables. They drink more carbonated drinks than they drink water. All of those kind of things that contribute to it, but they rarely, if ever, get any exercise. People like that just rarely ever get any exercise. Work too many hours and have developed really bad habits that contribute to them not feeling well. And then they wonder why they're not feeling well, right? They're stressed out. Their marriage is struggling. They don't get along with people. They're snappy. All of those kind of things. Number 4, your relationships. I know some people who do not seem to be able to get along with anybody. Every issue is a hill that they're willing to die on. That's ridiculous. Just let it go. Move on. This kind of person probably doesn't have many close friends simply because they're going to argue with you about anything. I have somebody like that in my life that I've known for a long time, and I just don't enjoy being around them because I know that everything is going to be an argument. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what day it is, what the weather's like. It doesn't matter what the politics is like. It doesn't matter anything. It's going to be difficult being around them. They're stressed out. They're stressed out. They're just stressed out about everything. And so these kind of people, they don't even know how to talk about how to resolve issues. They wouldn't have a clue how to resolve an issue that they had with somebody, and that will stress you out. Number 5, your decision making. I think this is huge. What we have seen, everybody listen carefully, what we have seen all throughout this study is that bad choices lead to bad consequences, right? Bad choices lead to bad consequences. And so if you're stressed out, you're going to make more bad choices than you would if you weren't stressed out. I mean, would you want somebody that was highly stressed out to be making a kind of a life-changing? I don't want my doctor when he walks into the office to be so stressed out that he can't give me good advice. And so some people even struggle to make a decision. They evaluate, and they can't come to a decision. They don't know how to make a decision, and that stresses them out. I call that analysis paralysis, right? Where you can't make a good decision. Just Sometimes you just got to make a decision about something. And so your life is always headed in the direction of whatever choices that you're making. And if they're bad choices, well, good luck with all of that. Number 6, you have your spiritual conflicts. Listen, if you do not know how the enemy is working overtime in your life to stress you out, to pick you apart, to weaken you, to hurt you, to cause high levels of stress in your life, you're in trouble. He's never doing anything that is designed to really work for you. He's whispering into your ear. He's telling you to use your own wisdom, whatever that may be, to work out everything. And what he does in your life eventually leaves you empty, frustrated, irritable, angry, disappointed, and discouraged. Every time. Every time. Not sometime. Every time. And then lastly, there are the things that happen to people that are way outside of what they can control. There are things that you and I can't control. I can't control the stock market. I can't control the decisions that the government makes and how many billions of dollars they're going to send somewhere else that we'll never get any return on that. I can't control the weather. I can't control the decisions I can't control other people, that's for sure, and I can't control the bad decisions that those other people make. It's way out of my control. It's out of your control. Just cannot control it. I can't control how people drive on the highway or how much food at the grocery store costs. Have you brought groceries lately? It's kind of crazy. One day we went to the grocery store. It was probably a month ago. I don't know what it was. I think it was one day when Andrew, he was home, and we were just going to have some sandwiches, right? Was it soup and sandwiches? We went in to get stuff for soup and sandwiches, and I'm sure that we added a little something else to it. Tammy, I know that you go and order and then go pick it up so that you don't have to walk down the aisles and pick something up. But we were in there and we walked out. It was right at $160 for lunch with soup and sandwiches. Yeah, I don't know what they were, but they were. I don't know what we did that day. It's just I can't control all of those costs or how much gasoline costs. All of these things are way beyond any single person's control, but I can assure you that they can all create, every single one of these things that I mentioned can create a very high level of stress in your life. I want to say to you, and we'll look at some of this in the next week or two, that stress has a tremendous impact on your body. On your body. It weakens you in an intense way. That's why they call it the silent killer. Of how the impact of stress that's on your life. So hopefully maybe we'll figure out a way to handle stress. That's the goal, right? That's the goal. The goal is not just to tell you that you have stress. Everybody knows that. The goal is to figure out how to deal with it. Now, I want to just, at this point in the study, I think it'd be really good to define stress. I'm not going to give you a big definition of it right yet, but just to see if stress is really the issue or not. Or could it possibly be something else? I mean, how interesting would that be? How interesting would that be? In reality, it seems reasonable to both assume and accept that many things in your life, many things, have the potential to cause stressful scenarios for you. So I think it would be good to see what stress does to you as a point of evaluating if you really think like God thinks. Because you're going to have those moments, just like Paul had them, just like Jesus had them, just like anybody else has them, everybody you know has them. You probably have children, if you're an older parent like I am. They're just, all of my children undergo different levels of stress in their life. And one of the things that stress can do is that stress can reveal different levels of weakness that may be in your life. Just reveal things to you and to other people, how you handle stress. Let's just say that you work with some really difficult people. That's not a hard thing to happen. That's not an unusual thing to happen, especially if you work in a large organization where you have a lot of people you have to answer to, and you don't agree with all the decisions that they make and how it impacts you, and work schedules and budgets and all of that, and raises that you may get and at the end of the year, whatever it may be. And so you work with some really difficult people. Well, how you respond to those people will probably reveal as much about your relationship to God, not your relationship to them, but what kind of relationship it is that you actually have with God. Those people are the tools. I know we talk about it, Tracy. Those people are the tools that God is using to help you see where you actually are in your spiritual life. And whether or not you really understand how the Christian life is to actually work itself out in a practical way. Maybe something very unexpected happens. Maybe you go through a crisis moment of some kind. I mean, a real crisis moment in your life. And that's going to, how you deal with that will reveal something much deeper about you. Let us, I want to clear the table for just a minute here. I just want to clear the table. I've said it already. I probably said it twice. You cannot live a life, you cannot experience a life that is free from stress. You can't do it. You're going to have stress. You're going to have stress in your marriage. You're going to have stress with your children. You're going to have stress at work. You're going to have stress at every level of your life. You're going to have stress at school if you're going to school, even if you're a young student. You cannot live a life that's exempt from experiencing the different levels of stress in your life. That life does not exist. That life does not exist. It probably the only place it ever existed, I was reading one book that said the only place that it ever existed was in the Garden of Eden for however long before the serpent came along. He'd been there, I think, for a long time, but Jesus was surrounded by stress every day of his life after he was baptized by John in the Jordan River. But the good news, when we look at the life of Christ, is that he never let stressful circumstances, whatever they were, it didn't matter at what level. I was reading this week in my devotions in the morning, I was reading about, I think it was in Luke, I forget, where he had spoken in the synagogue. Was that when it was when he had spoken in the synagogue, and they rose up and they were kind of leading him out to the brow of a hill so they could throw him off of it for blasphemy. And he just turned around and walked through them. So he never let the difficult circumstance govern his response to the circumstance. That's a key statement that I want to make today. Not a key principle, but just a key statement. He never let the difficulty of his circumstances govern how he was going to respond to them. The dictionary defines stress. I remember the first time that Dr. Tahino, you remember him, Chris, when I went to my urologist, the first urologist, and he got a little upset with me, and he just told me, he said, you have stage 4 metastatic cancer. And he said it's probably spread throughout your body pretty severe. Now, he hadn't taken any tests at that point, but I remember that Brenda and I it was an emotional time. I felt a little stressed out by it. We got in the elevator, and we just kind of looked at each other and just broke down for a little bit. I mean, it doesn't take long to get from the 3rd floor to the first floor, but when we gathered ourselves, we went out in the car and we just sat there. We talked a little bit. We prayed and we thanked God. That's what we did. Amen. Say amen. We thank God. Said, Lord, you tell us to give thanks in everything by prayer and to be not anxious, and everything by prayer and supplication, to let our requests be made known to you, and your peace will guard us. And then we called our children, and we were calm. They all wanted to know, or texted them, whatever it was. I think we called them and told them what had happened. But we responded to those circumstances that were difficult. I can't imagine what it'd be like, Larry, when they told you that they got to put a pump in you. It's going to have a wire that's coming out of you, a tube, and carry around, sleep with batteries and walk around with batteries and stuff. It had to have an emotional impact, be stressful on Bonnie.
It's called resist and make the doctor very angry.
It's just.
But I said no, I don't want it.
Yeah, well, the dictionary, not a biblical dictionary, defines stress as various forms of physical, mental, or emotional strain. It's interesting that it leaves out spiritual. Various forms of physical, mental, or emotional strain and tension. And I think the definition, if you read it further, it actually certainly recognizes that stressful circumstances can upset somebody's physiological equilibrium very quickly. No one argues that reality. So the real question, however, is what are stressful circumstances really doing to you and in you? This is important. All right, I'm not going to cover all of that today. What are they doing in you physiologically? It's not good. I want to say it again. It's not good. It's breaking everything down in your body that you don't want to break down. And so, and do you, I guess the question is, do you actually have the power and the strength to overcome the negative impact of what stress is creating on your life, on your family, in your children? How do you do that? Tammy wrote me a text this week. I've asked her to keep me up to date on Ava and her Crohn's disease because I'm praying about it, and I want to know when are you going to get, when are they going to approve this thing? And she writes and says where they have turned it down. And I wrote back, I don't know what I wrote back, it was short. I said, that's crazy. It's insane. It's insane. Here you have a beautiful young lady that needs the medication, and somebody somewhere in an office has something on a piece of paper that says, well, we don't do that yet. It's stressful. I know that, Andy, you were going to write an appeal for it. It's just insane. It's insane. You go to the doctor gives and it wasn't just one doctor, it was about 20 doctors, it seemed like, over 2 or 3 months of trying to evaluate and finally find out what it was. They find out what it was, and then the insurance company says, we're not ready to help you. Well, that's why you pay the insurance, right? That's why you pay for it every month. That's stressful. Stressful on Andy, it's stressful on Tammy, it's stressful on Ava. And so the problem comes to the surface when you begin to believe, this is important to me, the problem comes to the surface when you begin to believe that the difficult circumstances and people that you encounter are greater than your ability to overcome them. Right? Oh, this is just overwhelming. It's just overwhelming. You know, the suicide rate's up among young people. It's just increasing every year. We live in a culture that just almost promotes it. Now, I'm not trying to be arrogant or facetious in what I'm about to say, but Jesus never believed that those people and circumstances that create stress in your life were greater than your ability that He gives you to overcome them. I don't want, I hope my legacy is, I hope that your legacy is that we're not people that are stressed out. We don't come to church, we're just stressed out about anything and everything. Didn't like what somebody said, that we learned what God wants us to do and how He wants us to handle things. And I think the reason that Jesus never believed that those things that He encountered were greater than the ability that He had to overcome them was really very simple. It's because He thought like God thinks. He always thought like God thought. His thinking was always right. A mental and emotional stress are caused primarily by the way that you think and how you mentally process what it is that's happening in your life. That's what creates it, how you process something that happens to you. I'll give you an example of that here in a minute. I've told you before, a personal example, but let's just assume that something negative happens in your life. If you dwell on something negatively, if you dwell on something that's negatively, it will create negative consequences in your life. It will. There's no out from that. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. That's what you will become if you think negatively about things. If you think bitter thoughts, you cannot help but become bitter, right? You will have bitter emotions. If somebody's hurt you in some way, and you just dwell on that, you'll become like them. You'll become bitter. If you want to be a forgiving person like God is, then you have to have some thoughts about forgiveness, right? It all works. It's intuitive, really. It should be. When you think about how all of this actually works. I want you to go to Isaiah chapter 26 and verse 3. We've used this verse, I know, numerous times, Isaiah 26:3, but it's a great verse. I certainly have it underlined in my Bible from reading through Isaiah.
Gary, I'm so glad that we did thinking like God first before all this,
Mhm.
because when you were talking about you and Brenda going in the elevator, and then what you did when you got in the car,
Hmm.
even with the kind of message that you got, but we know how you are now and how
Hmm.
it's not going just like that doctor said.
Yeah, well,
You
it's,
gave it to God, and that's so important.
right.
And then with Larry, with the doctor and putting it off, but we had a lot of prayer going on.
Sure.
And he ended up only by days, if you remember. Wouldn't have happened if he hadn't put it off, getting the heart mate 3.
Right,
which
right.
is
I
much
remember
better
that.
than-
I remember all of that. You have a wise husband.
Thinking like God, I mean, you gotta do it. No matter
This church is blessed to have wise elders, trust me.
Didn't I hear something that Larry mentioned that his doctor said he was the best on that patient?
They're always amazed at how well he's doing when he gets there, so.
Larry said he might tell everyone that comes in there that. 'Cause he's like that.
You know, the guy I go get my hair cut from, Larry, Jeff Brown, he's one of my students. He's an African-American brother. He's a pretty sweet brother. His mother had the first one, and she had it installed down in Charleston, and she didn't live that long. I mean,
We just.
I'm not saying that to be discouraging. I'm just saying that to be encouraging.
We just lost the very first that heart pump that was put in at university. A woman that we were looking forward to seeing her for the LVAD get together coming up.
Right,
She just died in her sleep.
right.
Or was it 6 years she had
Right.
But we're not going to lose Larry.
it? No,
So,
that just gives us a good reason.
yeah, they got better machines coming out here. So,
We don't want to hold him up either. He's gonna get promoted.
Thank you, Andy.
I love Isaiah 26:3 because I think it seems to put stress and anxiety into perspective. This is what it says. It says, "You will keep him in perfect peace." You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. I want to say this in a way. I wanted to make it a key principle, but I didn't. And I want to say, as I'm kind of going through this, that my key principles are just my main points, right? I know I've had a lot of them. I'm probably at, I got 2 today. No, I've only got 1 today. I've given you 1, so got 2. They're just my main point. You know, if you were putting together a presentation, if Chris was doing a presentation on prepping, well, I've got some pages down here on that. He's got all the key points, right? Just can't remember everything, but I should have made this. I wish I could have made this. But this is the way I want us to look at this verse. Everything always gets back to God and how you relate what is happening to you to God. You've got to be able to take whatever it is that's happening in your life and find a way to get it back to God and how it relates to what He's allowing to happen to you. God's never taken by surprise. There's no surprise here. There's no, oh no. There's never an oh no in heaven, right? There's never an oh no at the throne. It's like, we got this. If you turn over to John chapter 14, verse 27. John 14, verse 27. Jesus is talking to his disciples here. And he's been in the upper room. He's washed their feet. And he says to them, he's told them he's leaving. He says, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled. Neither let it be afraid. Now, I want you to look at that last sentence there. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. I think it would be perfectly okay. I think it'd be perfectly okay from an explanation standpoint that you could say it this way. Let not your heart be troubled or stressed out or anxious. I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's what the verse is saying. So I think what God is saying, I think what Jesus is saying to his disciples here is that whatever is going to happen and whatever is troubling you and vexing you and whatever is making you anxious and whatever it is that's stressing you out in your life and making you afraid is exactly what God wants you to bring to him. We did get out of the elevator, Bonnie, and we went to the car, and the first thing that we did is that we took it to the Lord. And after that, I felt at peace. That was my biggest anxious moment through all of this, through any of the 6 surgeries, through anything I'm going now, even how I felt. I feel really great today. I'm really thankful about that. Now, I want you to think about, I want to give you 2 words. You ought to write these 2 words down. There's not any article that you can read about stress that doesn't generally identify these 2 things, all right? I want you to think about the difference between what is called stressors, 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 and stress. The stressors are all of those circumstances, those events, those people that actually create the levels of pressure and tension that you are experiencing. Maybe it's a boss that's just really ugly to you, curses at you, use God's name in vain. Maybe it's the idiot on the road that just ran. We were going to class one night recently. I say recently, probably 6 months ago. We were going to class about 6 months ago in Springfield. And we were just riding down the road to get to Sally. And there's a road that crosses it and goes to Wagner. I don't know where that road comes from, but it's a road that goes to Wagner.
Lake Park Road.
No, it's a different road. We turned off of 4 and went to Sally, and we crossed this road that goes to Wagner. And lo and behold, we're just riding along. We're coming back at night. It's kind of dark, and this car just goes through this stop sign, their stop sign. They had to stop, but we keep going. They went through that stop sign doing 55, 60 miles an hour. They never stopped. We were about 3 or 4 seconds away from just being T-boned, killed. Every time I go through that intersection, my wife can tell you right now, every time I go through that intersection, even at night when we come home late, we don't leave there until after 10, a lot of times we'll just cut the lights off so we can see if there's any other cars that are coming. It was stressful. I mean, it was like, wow, thank you, Lord, that you didn't allow us to be 3 seconds ahead of where we were. We'd have been dead. And so there are those people that just create levels of pressure and tension that you're experiencing. The stressors can be big or small. They can be anything. They can be you sprained your toe, maybe you caught a cold, maybe you forgot an appointment. None of that is a major level of stress. You can just call about your appointment and say, hey, I'd like to cancel it, or I'd like to reschedule it, or you can take something, for any headache or something that you have, or you're cold. None of that. They're vents that you can easily overcome with a fairly low level of stress. But there are other things, let's say like bankruptcy. The government's going to go bankrupt, it looks like to me. And when it does, it's going to cause a lot of stress on everybody. The banks are going to go bankrupt, I'm not a doomsday guy, but it's going to happen. It could be a terminal illness, it could be a divorce, it could be a major accident that somebody has. I had a good friend that used to own the Ark. He and his wife were coming back from Greenwood, and somebody ran into them head on, and they were in the. They barely. His name was Jay Jones, and they barely survived, and they were in the hospital, both of them, for just months. I mean, it was like 3 or 4 months that they were in the hospital in ICU.
Are you talking about Jake and his wife?
Yeah, his first wife. I mean, that's, you can lose your job. Any of those can be considered as a major source of stress. I remember, I want to say this, I remember when a young man, I want to explain it this way. I remember, you heard me tell this story many times, so I'm not trying to bore you with it. When the guy totaled our truck in Gainesville, Georgia, we were just sitting at a stoplight. We weren't really under any stress at all. We were just waiting for the light to change because we had to turn. We could see up the road where we had to turn and to get on up to Ringo where we were going to stay. And the unexpected wreck that happened when we were sitting there at the light, the wreck was what created the stress, right? It's what we would call the stressor. It was the wreck that was the stressor. And right before the accident, we were doing fine. Right before the stressor, we were doing fine. We were talking. My wife was actually driving. I think I was studying. I might have been grading some papers or something, and we were relaxed and talking and looking forward to getting where we were going. And then, just like that, everything just changed. Crash! Just like that. Just in a moment of time. Truck is just, can't even drive it. I had no brakes. Couldn't get it in gear. The front of it, the back of it was just completely demolished. The side of it, the front. And then to make it worse, right after that happened, we didn't even have a way to get to a motel room. We didn't have any transportation. It was too late in the afternoon. You couldn't call a rental service to come pick you up. We didn't know anybody. The highway patrolman wouldn't take us there. We finally rode in the wrecker. Had to take all our things out, put them back in the wrecker, and he took us to a motel. So I want you to think of a stressor as something negative that happens in your life that you would change, but you can't. Something that you would change, but you can't. It's that circumstance that you would have changed if you could, but you just are not able to do it. I would have much preferred that the lightning not hit our house or hit our tree. I'd have been much happier than that. And I'm glad that the tree didn't fall on Tim when we were there. So it didn't go in the right direction, did it? We wanted it to go that way, and it went that way. And so it was a big tree. And so, Andy and Tammy, if y'all get the trees taken down, you got to make sure you got somebody that knows what they're doing, because apparently we didn't know. But we gave it a good try, right? But you don't want it falling on your house or something. And the lightning was the stressor, right? That caused the stress in our life at that moment. So at that moment, something had to happen in our life. How were we going to view what had just happened to us? How were we going to let this thing called a stressor, how were we going to let it impact us? How were we going to respond to it? Would we be overcome by the inconvenience of not having any water for a week, having to go up to my sister-in-law's to take a shower every day, to get water from the pool to flush the commode that's got chlorine in it? You know, all of those kind of things. Just to brush your teeth, you know, we got bottles of water so we can brush our teeth and have something to drink, and not be able to wash clothes or wash dishes or even take a bath in our own home. My computer was shot, it was blown up. Ed came over and helped me with it, and it was just a mess. What were we going to do? For both Brenda and myself, I want to say this. I don't want to be the example here. I'm just going to say that I want to live like God wants me to live. We didn't let it stress us out. I said, well, honey, we're going to get some new appliances. I'm going to get a new computer and some new screens, which I did, and everything's going to be okay. And it was, and it is. And it was just a major at the moment, but minor in the big picture of our life, and we recognized that immediately. We were just really thankful that we weren't dead, that it didn't hit the tree. I mean, that it didn't hit the house and just cause the house to burn up, which it would have. It just became an inconvenience, and that's all that it was. That's all that it was. It was just an inconvenience. We had family nearby, where we get water, take a shower, wash clothes, and we just use some paper plates. No problem. You get those at Walmart, right? Don't cost much. So here's what we want to understand when it comes to the issue of stress. This is key principle number 187. A stressor is what happens to you. A stressor is what happens to you. Stress is how you respond to what happens to you. Stress is how you respond to what happens to you. A stressor can make you nervous, it can make you anxious, it can make you despairing, or you can let God use it to help you glorify Him in the midst of the tension. Think of it this way. The event is the stressor, and your response to the event is what creates the stress or eliminates the stress. Right? Your response to the stressor, your response to what's creating the stress, is what eliminates or even creates that stress. And what may be very stressful to you may not be stressful at all to somebody else. I mean, how you handle something that's very difficult, somebody else just may not be able to do it. I mean, it just may freak them out. I mean, they may go ballistic or something. You know, when we had the wreck, the first thing that we did is that once we got out of our car and we saw that the guy that caused the wreck was over on the side bleeding and not doing well, we went over and tried to help him. I didn't walk up to him and say, well, you stupid idiot. I didn't say that at all. I said, are you okay? Is there anything that we can do for you? I think that was the right thing to do, right? I think that was the right thing to do. It's stressful for me to be going fast in traffic. But it doesn't seem to affect race car drivers, right? It doesn't affect him to be bumper to bumper when 3 or 4 wide. If you've ever watched one of those NASCAR races, I've gone to watch them in person, and they're going a lot faster than it looks on TV. Trust me, they're going much faster than it looks. 200 miles an hour is really fast. I remember one time some guy, I'll never forget one time, they had a thing where they had a camera on a car that was going, they were trying to show you how fast they were going, that were going 55, which was the normal speed limit at that time, whatever it was, or 60. And they had a car pass them that was doing 200, and it was just like in the blink of an eye. You know, you can't even read the number. If you're in the stands, when that car goes by, you can't even read the numbers on anything. So everybody has different levels of endurance and of anxiety and patience and of faith. And the issue's simple. This is what really actually creates the stress in your life. Here it is. Right? Just listen carefully. This is a long sentence, so don't worry about writing it down. The greater the stressor and stressful circumstance, the greater will be the threat that it imposes on your life. The greater the stressor is, it will threaten your resources and your resolve, your will, your family. It may even threaten your faith in God. I think for a lot of people it does. Now, I think it would be very naive for any of us to think that just because we are a Christian, that for some mystical reason that we will be exempt from these difficult, stressful circumstances in our life. We will not be exempt. In fact, I think as we get closer to the second coming of Christ, if you turn over to 2 Timothy chapter 3, 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1, Paul made this statement. He said, "But know this, that in the last days that perilous times will come." And the Greek word there for perilous is really very interesting. It is translated in so many different ways. Chris, if you look this up on your accordance program, you would find that it has so many ways of being translated in the you had a parallel Bible thing there. It has the idea of reducing one's strength, of being very difficult and dangerous. By implication, I'm reading all this, it refers to a furious and fierce time in history. In fact, one translation says there will be violent periods of time. The New American Standard Bible says difficult times, and the NIV says terrible times. Know this, that in the last days, terrible, violent, difficult, furious, fierce times will come. So you get the picture. There are things like this that we don't have any control over. Famine, wars, pestilences, economic downturns, sin running rampant, and immoral society and culture like the Roman Empire, you know. It's all out of our control. Go to 1 Peter chapter 4. 1 Peter chapter 4. You know, when I read this, it's just the opposite way that most people think. It says in verse 12, "Beloved, do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange, weird, some strange, weird thing happened to you. Now, these next two words are just, they are like, are you kidding? But rejoice. But rejoice. You find yourself in something difficult, God says, I want you to be at peace. I want you to rejoice because I'm in control of your life. So once again, the question is, how are you going to think about all of these kinds of events? What are you going to think about the stressors that take place in your life? Will they overwhelm you? Will they destroy your faith in God? Will they exhaust you? Or will they, in a positive way, will you be more than an overcomer? Listen very carefully. You have to determine what it is that distinguishes you from the world. You have to determine what it is that distinguishes you as a Christian from the world. It's not that as a believer that you're going to be free from these stressful circumstances. You're going to have them. And the people around you that aren't saved, they're going to have them. But how you respond to them and how they respond to them are two completely different things. It's not that God is going to keep tense and really difficult moments out of your life. That's not going to happen, so don't think that it will. The real issue is whether or not you as a believer, as a follower of Christ, are able to experience the overwhelming, supernatural peace that God gives to His children in the midst of the most difficult circumstances of their life. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, we don't care what you do to us. We're not going to bow down to you. My wife and I were talking about this week. We were on the front porch or something talking about that verse, or on our couch or something, and she was making the remark that how did Nebuchadnezzar look in there and see that there were 4 people and that they were all alive? And I said, I don't know. I mean, it lapped up the other guards when they threw him in there, right? It killed him. It was so hot. I think when they got close to it. They had a peace about something that was very difficult. And they said, we don't care what you do to us. Go to Philippians chapter 4. It's been a favorite verse of ours all the way through this study. It will continue to be one of my favorite verses. It's one of my life verses. I have 2 life verses, Romans 8, 28 and 29, and Philippians 4, 6 and 7. It says, be anxious for nothing, Gary. Right? Be anxious for nothing, Larry. Be anxious for nothing, Chris. But in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, the peace of God that surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. This is the supernatural peace that only God can provide. This is what helps you more than anything else to overcome the stress that the enemy and the world are going to inflict on you. This is it. This is what you need. You need that peace. We've got to learn how to get that peace, right? This is the mindset that God wants you to develop in your life. Because God knows that His peace is much, much greater than your anxiety. It's much greater. It's much better. It's much healthier. He wants you to let His peace actually guard your heart and your mind. And I think that's a great trade in my mind. All right, anybody have any questions or comments that you want to make?